Hi everyone. Today we're going to take a little bit of a step back from our normal format, and instead we'd like to talk about just recent events that have been taking place. Recently, we all have heard and read of the events that took place in Unnao as well as Hyderabad, the rape cases. And that has led to a lot of discussion. So we wanted to take a moment ourselves, Cherry, Mojo, Pixie, to share our own stories of sexual abuse, molestations, violations to our own personal space.
I want to go first. I know I've shared this with both of you, but I think I've had incidents of abuse much early on in life. One was more like a one-off incident. The other was a more repetitive kind of incident.
With the same person.
With the same person, yeah. So the first one was more, I don't think it was even more than once, but it is kind of etched in my memory in terms of what happened. Like, it was somebody I know, somebody who was not much older, but I think, again, this person was a teenager and I was a much younger kid. I used to play around with this person, and I think one afternoon I was in their room and I kind of really remember this person forcing my hand into their private parts. And it was a person of the other sex. So I kind of like, there is a distinct memory of what that feels like. And it happened for a bit, and I remember the other person was being scared because of the pace of things, the way it was happening, and the door was closed, and it happened really fast, and then the door was open and we were out. So I kind of just remember that this happened, but it's kind of a really strong memory that I have in terms of just what that touch felt like, me touching this other person's private parts, the hair, whatever. All of that is a distinct memory. So that was one episode.
And how old were you? Around?
It's a little bit of, my memory is a little hazy there, but I think I was second, third standard. And
about 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
6, 7, 8.
Yeah. But the image I have of myself at that age is a much smaller, like
tiny.
much younger. Much younger person.
6, 7, 8 is tiny as well.
Yeah. And the other was more on an annual thing. I would go to native town or whatever, right? So, and then there was one person, I'm related to them in some way, so someone I know. And this was, again, playful exploration because we would share beds and things like that. So night, this person would do certain things which I was like play, and like sometimes, you know how kids were not sleeping late into the night. We're trying to, do funny things, crack each other up, and we're always laughing, and it's all hush hush. Parents will know, or, elders will kind of like ask you to go to sleep and all of that. So all this was happening, and then you kind of sense a little touch, a sensation, something that happened, all of that. And then initially I was like, trying to understand what this was and all of that. But because this was happening like on a regular basis, and this was somebody I trusted or whatever, I would go back on a yearly basis kind of a thing. I remember as I grew, I started enjoying it, or it was also kind of like me trying to explore more and be more actively involved in what was happening, because I was also trying to experiment and all of that. So I think those were two incidents that come to mind when I think of like abuse. So I think, those are mine.
And second one, were you sort of saying that similar ages and so similar experience and so similar want to explore, or what was the nature of that?
From my perspective?
Well, in terms of ages and
of mine,
yours versus that person.
In both cases, I think from the other person, it was more like growing up, exploring all of that, not intentional. Like, like I want to do some sort of, no one wants to harm, whatever. Like, I'm saying not.
But even in the second case, the person was older.
Older, yeah.
And significantly older.
No, I wouldn't say like 3 years older.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
At what point did you actually realize what had happened to you? Did you know, especially in the first story, when did you sit down and be like, oh, that was inappropriate or that was wrong? Like, do you have any memory about that?
Yeah, I knew these had happened to me, and these were like really vivid memories. But I think I really started thinking more and more about it as I was coming to terms with my sexuality. Like, like much later, you're trying to understand what's happening with you. Like, I remember growing up as a teenager feeling very different. Like, what is happening to me? Why am I feeling these things? And then you're trying to search for, like, if I have a girlfriend, maybe I'll feel different. Or was it because this thing happened to me that I feel different, that I feel some sort of like, am I like, because I was naturally feeling attracted to men. But I was like, I'm also trying to understand what is happening with me. And that's when I really started thinking about my abuse. And that's when I had also learned the vocabulary of that was abuse or whatever. You knew something happened, you knew it was wrong, but only then later kind of me saying that was abuse that happened to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Even coming to that, especially in the second one, which is even more complex because, the dimension of you perhaps enjoying it at some sense and thinking of navigating through those feelings.
Yeah.
And also still realizing that for yourself, coming to terms with it as abuse and leading up to that and things like that. What was that journey like?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a gray area for me because because as much as this person was slightly older than me, but we were literally like, whatever, we were literally like of the same age or whatever, right? In terms of like the way we were growing up and all of that. So because we would meet on an annual basis, our bodies had grown, our bodies had changed. We had learned things, we had experienced different things. So there was that active coming together of let's explore this kind of a thing. Yeah. So somewhere I find it a little difficult to pinpoint this responsibility on the other person, though the other person initiated it. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Right. Because I mean that one was sort of reminiscent of I wasn't part of it, but I still remember we were as young as 5 years old. And these 4 girls who had a slumber party, and this was an all-girls school, it was a convent. They were sort of, twittering about with each other and wondering what was happening and stuff. And it turns out that they had all gone to this one girl's place for a slumber party, and they were talking about how they played the kissy game, where they're sort of reminiscent of, similar age folks. It doesn't have to be age, but sort of mindset where you want to explore, and at that point, it's sort of a collective vision of why we're here and what we're doing and what we're exploring and what we're touching and feeling and things like that. But then as you grow older and you start to think about maybe the nuances that you didn't consider, and I totally understand the struggle of thinking of pinning it. It's like pinning the tail to a donkey and saying, this is it, and it's black and white, and it was this, and it wasn't that. And it can get complex. Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, there are some things that are black and white, right? I mean, some elements of at least the first one are definitely... Yeah. You're not of sound mind and body and willingly going to that.
Yeah, but again, I think because your memory also is like after a point starts failing you, and your I remember like we were like 4 or 5 kids in the same bed, like sleeping together and all of that. Like, how did it start? I can't remember the exact point when it started, so I'm always like second guessing myself, like what did I do anything, or did I whatever. Like, I mean, of course I think we were young, but you can always point to that. But yeah, I think it's a little like confusing,
a little bit about also like playing doctor and touching parts and really was the human sort of exploration kind of thing. But yeah, in terms of some things are black and white, I think that still holds true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my case it was black and white, for sure. I was around 8, a relative of mine, late teens, maybe 18, 19.
So definitely in the know.
Yeah, definitely in the
what
know.
Is black and what's white.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah.
And I think, so the memory that I have is, it's a sort of very vivid memory of being in the bedroom, on the bed, with this person sort of lying on top of me and touching me everywhere. And that's like a really vivid memory. In my head, the space is very dark. Everything's quite dark. But yeah, the place where the hand goes on my leg to my pelvic area, my thigh, my upper body. I think there was some movement. Like, we weren't naked. We were still clothed. I think there was movement. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's some memory that I have. I don't remember the details around it or anything like that, because what I think happened was that I suppressed the memory. And I only realized what had happened many, many years later when I was reading a Daniel Steele novel in which a very similar case happened. So I only started to understand what it was after that. And again, I don't think I actually went back to that memory until my maybe mid-20s, when I was out of university and sort of had more time to think about what had happened. But that is a very vivid memory. And I always knew I was very uncomfortable next to this individual whenever we met. Surprisingly, up till now as well. Because it's not something that I ever shared with anybody. As I went through my own process of healing, I think the way I looked at it was that we lived in a very sort of traditional household where nobody talked about sex at all. It is very likely that this person was also kind of exploring or had urges but didn't know who to talk to about them. So I kind of went through this process of understanding what had happened and not come to terms, but just know that I didn't really play a part in this. At all. And that was something that I think oftentimes questioned whether I had played a part in this or not. And so coming to terms with the fact that I did not play a part in this, and this was this individual's sort of urge that they were satisfying or something that they were exploring, and I had nothing to do with it. And kind of then making sense of what had happened. But many years later, in fact, earlier this year, at a family wedding, this individual was there, and I thought that I'd gone through my own journey to kind of make sense with it, understand what had happened, how it impacted my other sexual relationships with others, and that I was fine. Like when I was to see this person again, after many years, nothing would happen. But it was the opposite. I felt very uncomfortable, and I still felt like this individual was a predator. And I, just with the body language, the facial expressions, and just the presence of this individual. And yeah, I was actually quite surprised by that, because I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to feel that, but I did. Since then, of course, I've spoken about it to my sisters, as well as after this year, after the wedding, I did speak to my parents. I didn't say what had happened when I was a child, but I did say that, I don't ever want to be next to this individual ever again. So don't ever put me in this situation. But it was really surprising to me how I felt. And now I knew that when I was there that also this person hadn't changed.
Oh.
Yeah, they were still a predator. Like, the behaviors and the actions. Like, again, like, I was very clear that this was not me. Yeah. This was the other individual and their behaviors when it came to women, or just me, I don't know. But it was very clear that it wasn't me. So, yeah. But it took me a while to actually understand what had happened and make sense of it, not make any sense of it. And it definitely impacted my own understanding of my body, my comfort with my body, as well as, my relationship with men. Hence, the sexual exploration that I did was much later in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And you can draw sort of a straight line from the fact that the exploration started later to this. Is that...
Yeah.
Do you find that's true for you?
I mean, I do think that until... I clearly remember that the first time I ever spoke to anyone about this was in a piece that I'd written in class, in my university class. And it was a seminar called Writing to Heal. And it was the first time that I wrote or shared this with someone.
Oh, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, and it was a piece that I'd written, and I think that was the time when I started to actually heal or kind of make sense of what had happened. It was a therapeutic process for me. And only then, I think, being more comfortable meeting men or being around men and in a sexual way.
Yeah.
What a wonderful course. So the entire course was designed around that.
Yeah, it was designed around writing to heal. So everybody who attended the course was writing around. We were reading books that had been written about things that were difficult, grief, sexual abuse, violence. And we were also writing a lot of that material ourselves. So yeah.
So, I mean, a wonderful call out to folks who might find writing a first step to speaking to someone. That might be opening yourself up to being more vulnerable, but writing, wow, that's amazing. That should be like a course that everyone should take. What I found especially powerful about the story, the journey, specifically the journey, is that how many years have transpired since, right? How many years have passed since? Because there's so many people who are always just befuddled by the fact that someone, let's say, has found that the moment to talk about it is now, and that now happens to be 20 years from so-called the event. Like, why didn't you speak up before, and why didn't you say something? And this was such a organic way of just sharing the story. I mean, revealing what can happen in somebody's psyche, and what is going through someone's mind, and why it might legitimately sometimes take years and years and years for someone to come to terms with something. And to first of all write, maybe, and then also speak about it.
Especially when you experience this as children, where there are no words or there's no way to understand that experience at all.
And especially with, like, you're also, I think that's why now what people are doing is this whole education about good touch and bad touch, because the line is so thin, just to understand, especially with people you know and trust and all of that. Like, even when you were kids, like, some people were extra affectionate, so they would like come and kiss you all the time, or on your cheeks, on the lips or whatever, and some would like also like touch your private parts, and in a funny way or whatever, right? And like to know what is okay, what is not okay, trusting someone to speak to about this, and feeling of shame, all of that I think just adds up to the complexity of what happens. And sometimes you just don't want to address that. That's why you kind of like put this away in a little corner and throw it away until kind of like it's time to whatever face. Yeah, and what really fascinates me about speaking about this stuff, and I kind of recall like earlier, like a few years back when I, for the first time, kind of spoke about this, and I thought this was like, people are going to be shocked by this or whatever, like when I finally shared it with them. So whenever I felt comfortable with certain friends, I would like speak to them about this, and what blew my mind was every time there was another story that came out from the other person, like the other person saying, yeah, it happened to me as well, me too, whatever, right? Like, so it's so common, and it actually happens to a lot of people. Like a majority of people have gone through some form of abuse. So it's mind-boggling how,
and all kinds, right? Like we're not only talking about like I even remember thinking about just, at a train station being molested by someone, or a memory that I have was up north. I was in UP doing some work, and in broad daylight, a man who was drunk was walking towards me and just literally grabbed my pelvis and kept walking. And I was in my 20s, but I was so shocked by what had happened. All these little moments of just being violated kind of add up. And it really, you start to question so many things about your body, who you are as an individual. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of anger that you don't even know how to express. Because so much of it is just the shock of going through. Like, you don't even get to anger until much later because there's so much shock in what you've just experienced. So it's all of these kind of experiences that we face.
I think thinking back to things and like talking about it, you suddenly realize, and like the penny drops, so to speak, and you're like, oh my god, that's what it was. So something about what Pixie said about trains and traveling. This happened to us. We were traveling, my family and I, on a train, and you know how the berths are, the sleeping, like there's 6 of them in that compartment, and I was on like a middle one or the top one, so I could see below. So I was on the top one, and I kid you not, I thought it genuinely happened in slow motion, because it was happening and I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't moving. And I think my sister or somebody, there was some female person on the opposite middle berth. So as I'm looking over from where I'm sleeping, my vantage point, I can see that person lying down there. And so people are walking past on the aisle, up and down. And this in the night, you know how all the lights get turned off, and you have just this light really close to the bathroom that's sort of shedding light through the course of the aisle. So you see a little bit of light. And so because I was up, I was reading, I was looking at I don't know what I was doing. and sort of facing the side of, this lady. I was looking at that side. And I saw an arm, and I genuinely thought I was imagining it. I saw an arm come towards that middle berth from below and like just touch that person's foot, the lady lying down there. And as soon as all of that happened in slow motion, because I didn't react, but as soon as it happened, I was like, hey, or I just like shouted or something. And quickly the hand like got retrieved, and I looked over into the aisle and I saw this guy just running down. And quickly, like, I got my dad woke up and he got up and he chased him, like, went down a couple of, bogeys and they tried to catch this person and stuff. And that was the first time my face happened. Till then, I don't know, maybe protected life, I don't know what. But I was just sort of shocked. I was like, what?
Yeah.
All he did was really just touch the foot, but just the idea, it's the intent that I find gives me like hyperventilation. It's the idea that somebody would walk down a street and think it was okay in Pixie's story to touch her, her crotch. I mean, just the audacity. So what are this, that's what really bothered me. And I was really unsettled and angry, and I was mainly it was anger. So when you said something about getting too angry, for me it was immediately anger first. I was angry. Clearly that didn't happen to me, but I was still super angry. But I mean, in terms of what that connects to, I mean, in terms of somebody taking advantage of a certain situation, something of that nature did happen when I was with somebody at some point in my life, and this person tried to go at it once when I was sleeping, right? So we decided not to, and the person tried to penetrate while I was sleeping, and it woke me up. So I woke up and I was immediately, I was livid. Because whatever, there's no because to that. I mean, it was straight up violation. We just talked about this, and that also does make me think about the why. The why of that behavior. Like, what is spurring you to have the audacity to do that? And, just whatever this person has certain, we were talking about urges. One of you guys talked about urges. Like, they had urges that they wanted to get out. And we're trying to be understanding, and we're trying to understand what their story was. But to me, all that benefit of doubt, that's fine. I think it's good to understand what's going on. But at the end of the day, there's a line. Yeah. And you've crossed it. And there's a clear understanding that I was wrong. I just remember being angry, and then I just got over it. I don't know. But the important thing is that I didn't talk about it to anybody. Yeah. So this other first story, which was in the train, was we were all in it together, and it wasn't even really my story to tell or anything. I mean, I didn't experience it viscerally, but I was just visually there, experiencing it. I mean, but the other one, the second one, I mean, it was literally penetration.
Yeah.
And so the first one didn't need much talking because we were all there jabbering away after that. But the second one, I just, what I'm trying to say is that neither got connected. It's not like I thought, talking about it would be healthy. Because, see how it happened last time, like all of us sort of, complaining about the security on the train, blah, blah. That sort of decompressing and getting it all out there helped. I don't know, it just didn't occur to me. And I sort of dealt with it on my own and just had it in my head and my heart and just got over it. I literally got over it. Yeah. I was just like, no big deal. Yeah. Which is odd, because there was still some, many, many years later, a sense of it wasn't entirely resolved. Not that there needs to be retribution per se, but just an acknowledgement is, I think, what all of us seek at some level, right? The coming out with these stories is sometimes just for the other person to say, yes, that was a line and I crossed it. That's all. You don't even need an apology, just an acknowledgement. Yeah. Right? How do you guys, decompress when you revisit those stories? Or, how have you unpacked it?
Yeah, I think over time, just with more understanding of it and just being able to speak a lot more. I think one of the reasons why we created this podcast, right? Just creating these safe spaces to talk about it and to realize that a lot of people go through this on their own, but only if they knew that sharing was a possibility. It could hopefully heal them in some way, or even just kind of saying something when something was wrong, right? Just calling it out. I think for whatever reason, I think people don't have to suffer if anymore. They've already gone through a lot of trauma, but being able to speak about it and share, I think that makes it okay. I don't think as people we need to live through this experience
Definitely
by ourselves.
I also think that as I began to share the story more and all kinds of stories more, I also found courage in facing some of that. So I don't think many years ago I would have told my parents in any form or my sisters in any form about what had happened. But because I was speaking a lot more about it outside of home, when it came to my family, I had courage to share it with my family. And I also had courage to kind of free myself from some of those memories. It just helped give me courage.
Yeah.
No, I like that phrase, Pixie. What you felt freed from that story, from that experience. Imagine that you're freed from a memory. I mean, it's real. You can never undo it. That's an interesting. I mean, I that resonates with me because in the second story I shared about not being party to the penetration, the person immediately was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like as soon as saw that I was angry, there was that kind of apology. So I'm not saying that the person was like, but it seemed more coming from a place of self-interest. Like, immediately that now this can blow up in my face. Like,
that you were caught.
It wasn't genuinely a genuine, like, sit-down conversation. More of a true demonstration of understanding that, wow, what I did was, like, genuinely, deeply, profoundly wrong. Not just, it's not just a slip of the hand, like a slip of the penis. I think that's the difference that I was really looking for. And I don't feel really certainly freed from it. But at the same time, I think I have, in a sense, deprioritized it. Like, I don't need to be freed from that. I've just realized that, you know what? It is not worth it. I'm well beyond in other ways and forms and found ways to live on my life. And it wasn't that huge a mark in my life. But if I just think about it, if I revisit that, I get a little irate about the fact that there wasn't quite a resolution. But at the same time, it's interesting. I find myself saying, you know what? Whatever. Just move on. So I don't know if that's doing a disservice to such stories or I'm coping. And maybe in a sense, I'm not even coping. I mean, I just don't think there's enough there for me to have to cope with from my perspective. Just me personally, like Cherry. But it does leave me with a sense of like a lack of resolution because of that, not having had that very important conversation with that person. And had we had that, then it would have just been completely off my mind and completely freed from it. So that's making me think that I'm not freed from it, is basically what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, I haven't in fact been freed from it.
Yeah. No, I think that's what happened to a lot of people last year when the Me Too movement happened, right? Just like people sharing these stories and that giving others courage, saying, hey, that happened to me too, and it's time I call that person out. I mean, a lot of people, like, I think are coping in their own ways, but then sometimes to realize that it has left such a deep impact on them, and it has scarred them in some way.
I do have to say that, yes, it did for a while after that. It was a while after that I had another relationship. And I remember being really weird and awkward. I told this person who was a wonderfully kind human being. I just wasn't even, I couldn't even bring myself to kiss. Like, it was a weird, like, I was like shaking. It was like, it was also excitement, but also just me suddenly, like, finally doing it again. I don't know if that was, maybe they were related. I still haven't thought through that connection, but I genuinely was super, like, I wanted to kiss this person and embrace them affectionately, but I just couldn't, it was weird.
There was something stopping.
Yeah, there was something stopping me.
And one weird way I think it impacted me is later on in life, as I started exploring, doing other stuff, I was always scared if I was being the perpetrator. Like any sort of exploration, I would always feel extra guilty because I was trying to do something or something new, untried. And I was always like, oh my God, have I now become that person? I think I particularly recall this one incident, something that happened with a friend. It was sort of like a misunderstanding of sorts and me coming to terms with my sexuality, all of that stuff. And then when that happened, and just this memory, it just took me back to that memory of abuse that I had suffered. And sort of like I went through a time of deep like guilt where I felt, have I now inflicted that pain on another person? So again, I think it's very hard because especially, like, I don't know if I'm necessarily tying it back to the right thing, but somewhere, these episodes in my mind are so close, like, what is what, just kind of calling it out. And I don't know if one impacted the other or not.
Well, I think that's an important, revelation to yourself, but because it can well be the case. I mean, but it's important to have that conversation with that individual, perhaps, if they're willing and wanting. To acknowledge, because at the end of the day, like, for me at least, like I was saying, and I think perhaps it is true for many, is that acknowledgement. Like, look, there was a line and I crossed it, and I realized profoundly that was, again, profoundly wrong, and whatever. And to have an open, honest conversation about it, because, people can evolve.
Yep.
We're not all the same people. Like, that same person who might have, the perpetrator, so to speak, can have evolved, and I'm open to that possibility. But that evolution is definitely predicated on you coming to terms with what you've done in your past, right? You can't have evolved without having done the coming to terms with, right? So it's, absolutely open to that kind of revisiting of our own actions.
Absolutely. And I think in my case, I kind of recall like taking a lot of time to even come to terms with it and understand that to some point, like, forgive myself for what happened because I was also young. Like, I mean, just giving myself the benefit of doubt that happened because I was also going through things, and I didn't act out of, because I was reading the signs and I thought that was what that was and things like that, right? So
definitely.
I think a really important thing that both of you have mentioned is acknowledging it for yourself, forgiving yourself, and then going through that other journey of getting, actually having a conversation with a person to get acknowledgement about what had happened, is hopefully if they've gone through that journey themselves. But this idea of forgiving yourself plays such a big role in all of this, because really there was so much that we did not know when we were growing up. There was so much that schools didn't share with us, families didn't share with us when we were growing up. Like today, the way I like deal or speak to my nieces and nephews, a lot of how I talk to them is this, like, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about what's okay and what's not okay. Let's talk about the pleasure of having sex, because for me, the idea of sex was that it's painful, it's bad, it was just never something that I felt like I wanted to do.
Right. Because
there were just so many memories and associations attached to it,
right?
It
got demonized.
Yeah, like in my head it was just, and because not just one incident, right? Like all the other small incidents that add up to this. I never thought of sex as pleasure and fun and the love that comes from another person when they touch you with care and kindness. And I think that's really important to be able to share that with the next generation, that there are some things that are sort of dark, but unless we don't talk about that darkness, that's all you will think about it. Like, you will only think about it as the dark space. But there is so much about it that's also really beautiful. It's become like my life's mission, especially with my nieces and nephews, to ensure that, in the future, that the person that they come to and have these conversations with, I'm there. Like, you don't have to worry about who to go to and who to talk to.
Definitely, each of us can do that, and every person can. Even before, you don't even need to wait for someone else to create a safe space for you, but you could do that for one person.
So
if each of us did that, can you imagine, like, safe spaces just mushrooming all over the place?